Hey guys, welcome back to Kellen Time, and today we're going to take a look at my Omega Speedmaster. So I know you guys are thinking, you've seen a million Omega Speedmasters, everyone has an Omega Speedmaster, what's so exciting about them, and why do you have them? Well, I'll be honest, I wasn't the biggest Speedmaster fan originally. When I started getting into watches, this definitely wasn't one that I felt like I had to own or needed. But as time goes on, your tastes kind of change, and you develop interest in things and other areas within the watch world. And this was something that kind of started coming out on my radar. I'm not a huge chronograph guy, so that might be part of the reason that I never really had that draw to the Speedmaster. I'm also not a big sci-fi space kind of nerd, so that also may be a reason that I don't or never really did have a huge draw to the Speedmaster. But I am a big, obviously a watch fan, and it has a ton of history in the watch world, and I think you have to give it respect for what they created, and kind of has obviously stood the test of time. It's kind of like the Submariner and the Speedmaster 1A, 1B is in terms of one of the more iconic watches. I honestly like that, even today you can almost get, from a 5-foot view, the same looking watch that they did, in 1957. Whereas you can't really buy today a Submariner that looks like the old Submariner because the case has changed a bit and whatnot. So let's get into this, and this is just going to be a little bit, I don't know if it's called a buyer's guide, but essentially which model reference did I go for? So as you can see, this has a little bit of aging to the dial, to the hour indices specifically, and this is a reference 3590.50, and I think there's a bunch more numbers, but that should encompass what this reference is. So that reference, and again, I'm not a Omega Speedmaster reference nerd, but I can tell you after doing my research why I picked this model and a little bit more about it. So to me, this reference was the most affordable version of a vintage style Speedmaster that you could get. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's the last Speedmaster that had a tritium dial. So the hour indices and then the hand set, they used tritium instead of Super-Luminova. After this model, they moved to Super-Luminova. And when they moved to Super-Luminova, as you guys probably know, Super-Luminova does not age quite like tritium does, and tritium is the material that they used to give it its luminous quality, and that over time fades and it turns kind of that yellowy color depending on which how old and all that kind of stuff. So I enjoy that. I think it gives the watch some character. I think it gives it some charm. You can always go get a brand new Omega Speedmaster and have it that very contrasting, stark, kind of white on black dial. But I think that the aging of this gives it some character, like I said. So that was reason one, the tritium dial. Reason number two is it has a hesylite crystal, which essentially is plastic, and you can polywatch it, and it's not very hard, and it scratches really easy, but it gives it a little bit of warmth. And again, after this reference, they moved to Sapphire. So they went from this, which was a tritium dial hesylite, to a Sapphire Super-Luminova, which essentially is still what you can buy brand new today. Now there's some differences in the movement and whatnot, and there are some differences in the movement. So this is an 861 movement, which is a 17 jewel hand winding chronograph. They moved to, I believe, the 1861 after this, which is an 18 jewel, and I'm not even sure what they use today, what the newest model is. And obviously, if you're in the watch world, they just said they're going to come out with the 321 again. That doesn't really matter to me as much. I'm not a movement snob or nerd. I don't care to have exhibition case backs, unless it's a really pretty movement. It's fun, but you know, I put my watches on my wrist to wear them, and you don't ever see it, so it's kind of moot point to me. But yeah, so those are kind of like the big reasons. I think that, you know, and then the other fact is, you know, you get the vintageness, right? Like I talked about, you get the tritium dial, you get the hesylite crystal, you get some aging, and it's going to be your most affordable option in that realm. So this is the newest, or I guess the youngest produced Omega Speedmaster, where you can get all that. You can also get all of that if you keep going back into older Speedmasters like the 145 and prior, but your price is just going to go up and up and up. To find a clean one that's, you know, unpolished, without major work needed, original, hasn't been messed with. So for me, someone that's not necessarily going to spend, you know, $5,000-$10,000 on a Omega Speedmaster. You know, at the time I bought this watch, I've had it for I think over a year now. You could find really clean 3590s for around the $3,000 to, at the high, the $3,200-$3,300 mark. I just looked before I started this video, and that their prices seem to creep up. I think just like any vintage watch in the moment, all of their prices are just creeping. And I just did a quick search on Watch Recon, and the 5 3590s that are posted are $3,850, $4,000, $4,000, and $3,500. Various conditions, box papers, up or down. So yes, the price has gone up, but I still think it's probably the best value in Speedmasters that you can get today, because I think that price, the retail price on these, is going to continue to climb. Now, the one thing that I did think about getting, I think in the 145s, that you don't get in the 3590s, is a step dial. And what that means is it's kind of hard to see because of the dome, but where the outer minute track meets the inner dial, where it doesn't have the markings anymore, on the older ones there's a pronounced step in the dial, which adds a lot of depth to it, and these newer 3590s don't have that. So you can go look up photos of step dial Omega, and it's really pretty, kind of texturing, layering in the dial. But to me, that need or that want for that part of the dial wasn't necessarily worth the extra price increase. So that's kind of where I sat with it. If you've never had an Omega Speedmaster, obviously your running seconds is the 9 o'clock subdial, and then your chronograph function with your once you start and stop the chronograph is your 3 and 6 o'clock subdial. So as you can see, that big tall hand is your chronograph sweep hand, and I'll start the chronograph there, and it's a pretty satisfying click. You can see it go there, and then so the 3 o'clock subdial is your minute counter, and then your 6 o'clock subdial is your hour, and then you got still your running seconds, doesn't affect it. But yeah, so that's my Omega Speedmaster, guys, and why I think it's probably the best value to get right now. You still get some of that vintage charm without paying that crazy vintage price. There's a couple different bracelets you can find on these. I'm going to be honest, I didn't even really research the differences in the bracelets. This is a pretty standard bracelet for this model. And yeah, it's comfortable. It doesn't have a ton of articulation. You can see it maxes out there, but that doesn't really affect it. You know, the Speedmaster is amazing because it has that 42 millimeter size, but it just wears really well. And if you've ever worn one, you'll know that it doesn't wear like it's probably the best wearing 42 mil that you can get. It's a great watch. It, can kind of do anything. If you need a dressier watch, it'll pull that off. If you just want a sportier watch, obviously it does that. The big drawback on Speedmasters is they're not very water resistant. So this isn't the watch I'd put on if I'm going to go swimming or be at the beach. But outside of that, everyday chores and washing your hands, you don't have to worry about it. This watch was designed to go in space. I'm sure splashing some water on it is not gonna kill it. But it's probably because it doesn't. People get freaked out because it doesn't have a screw-in crown. It's just your standard hand wind, and then you pull it out to set the time. Yeah, guys, let me know what questions you have. Love this watch. It's definitely a keeper. It's a pretty clean example of a 3590. Let me know if you have questions. I did a fair bit of research on this model reference specifically. Again, I'm not a Speedmaster guru or anywhere close to that, but I did do a lot of research to make sure I knew what I was getting into and which model I wanted and why. So to me, the 3590 is the best entry point into a vintage. Now, most people wouldn't consider this a vintage, but it definitely will be when in a couple years, and it's the last of the tritium dial, and it's the last of the hezolite and all that kind of stuff. So it has a lot of those vintage qualities without being vintage. You kind of get the best of both worlds. And again, I think these were made, and I can't remember exactly, but in the late 80s, early 90s time frame. So 85 to 95-ish. I could look that up to verify, but I know it's somewhere around there. But yeah, let me know what questions you have. Love to talk to you guys about this. Did a lot of research before I bought mine about a year ago. So that's all I got today, guys. See ya.